Every gardener knows the moment. The leaves turn yellow, the stems lose strength, the edges go brown, the soil feels wrong, either too dry, too wet, or strangely lifeless. And the first instinct is to feed the plant before it is too late. But this is where many struggling plants are lost. Not because the gardener did nothing, but because the gardener gave a stressed plant more than its damaged roots could handle. Whatever the plant may be, seeing it weaken can make even experienced gardeners feel helpless. So we rush to help. We pour on fertilizer. We try another homemade remedy, then another. And before long, the roots that were already struggling become even more stressed. The surprising truth is that a weak plant is not always asking for food. Sometimes it is asking for oxygen. Sometimes it is asking for drier soil. Sometimes it is asking for shade. And sometimes it is simply asking for patience. By the end of this video, you'll know 5 gentle natural fertilizers that many gardeners use to support recovering plants. When each one makes sense, and just as importantly, when feeding is the wrong decision altogether. Because sometimes the best way to save a plant is to stop trying to force it to grow. Instead, you create the right conditions so it can heal itself. Let's begin. The first mistake almost every gardener makes happens the moment a plant starts looking unhealthy. Yellow leaves appear, the stems begin to droop, growth slows down, leaf edges turn brown, flowers stop blooming. The immediate assumption is almost always the same. The plant must be hungry, so fertilizer goes into the watering can. But plants cannot tell us what is wrong using words. They communicate through symptoms. And the challenge is that many completely different problems can produce almost identical symptoms. Yellow leaves can certainly indicate nutrient deficiency, but they can also appear after weeks of overwatering. Roots sitting in constantly wet soil cannot breathe properly. As oxygen disappears from the soil, roots begin to weaken, making it harder for the plant to absorb nutrients that are already there. The leaves turn yellow, not because fertilizer is missing, but because damaged roots can no longer use it. The same yellow leaves may also appear during prolonged drought. When soil becomes extremely dry, roots stop transporting water efficiently. The plant begins sacrificing older leaves to protect new growth. Again, the problem is not necessarily nutrition. Drooping stems create another common misunderstanding. Many gardeners see wilted leaves and immediately assume the plant needs water. Sometimes that is exactly right. Other times the soil is already soaking wet. In fact, one of the earliest signs of root rot is a wilted plant sitting in soggy soil. Adding even more water only accelerates the damage. Brown leaf edges often create even more confusion. Dry air inside heated homes, hot afternoon sun, salt buildup from previous fertilizer applications, wind stress, poor watering habits, all of these can produce similar crispy edges. Slow growth can also have many causes. Perhaps the plant recently experienced transplant shock. Perhaps temperatures dropped unexpectedly. The symptoms may look similar, but the solutions are completely different. This is why experienced gardeners rarely reach for fertilizer first. They investigate, because feeding the wrong problem is like giving someone vitamins when they actually need fresh air. It may not solve anything. Sometimes it even makes the situation worse. And this is why 2 gardeners can use the same natural fertilizer and get completely different results. One corrected the real problem first, the other never found it. Before any fertilizer enters the picture, there is one question that matters more than any other. Is the plant actually still alive? This may sound obvious, but plants often survive far longer than they appear to. One of the easiest checks is called the scratch test. Using your fingernail or a clean knife, gently scratch away a tiny section of the outer bark on a stem. If you see fresh green tissue underneath, that section of the plant is still alive. If everything underneath is brown, dry, and brittle, move lower on the stem and test again. Many shrubs, herbs, and even small trees die back from the tips while keeping healthy tissue lower down. That hidden green layer tells you recovery is still possible. Roots provide another important clue. If the plant can safely be removed from its pot, take a careful look. Healthy roots are usually white, cream-colored, or light tan, and they feel firm. Roots that are dark brown, black, mushy, or have a sour smell are often suffering from rot. Not every damaged root system is beyond saving. If healthy roots remain, recovery is still possible after correcting the conditions that caused the damage. Next, check the soil itself. itself. Push a finger several inches below the surface. Many gardeners only judge moisture by looking at the top layer, but appearances can be deceiving. The surface may seem dry while the root zone remains soaked, or the top may look damp while deeper soil has become bone dry. Understanding what is happening below the surface is far more important than what you see above it. Now smell the soil. Healthy soil usually smells fresh and earthy. If the soil smells sour, rotten, or swampy, oxygen may be lacking and harmful microbes may already be multiplying around weakened roots. That unpleasant smell is not something to ignore. Take a close look beneath the leaves as well. Tiny insects often hide where they are difficult to notice. Spider mites, aphids, whiteflies, thrips, and scale insects can all weaken plants gradually without being obvious at first glance. Look for sticky residue, fine webbing, tiny moving insects, or distorted new leaves. Sometimes removing the pest solves the problem long before fertilizer ever becomes necessary. Finally, check the container itself. Does excess water actually drain away? Blocked drainage holes can turn even the healthiest potting mix into a waterlogged environment. Roots deprived of oxygen cannot recover simply by adding nutrients. Once you've worked through these simple checks, the situation often becomes much clearer. The goal is no longer to guess. The goal is to understand what your plant is actually experiencing, because only then can you decide whether gentle feeding has a place in its recovery. This brings us to one of the biggest misunderstandings in gardening. People often believe that a struggling plant needs stronger fertilizer. In reality, the opposite is frequently true. Imagine trying to eat a huge meal while recovering from a serious stomach illness. Even healthy food may become overwhelming because your body is not ready to process it. Damaged roots face a similar challenge. When roots have been stressed by excess water, drought, heat, transplant shock, or disease, they temporarily lose much of their ability to absorb nutrients efficiently. Pouring concentrated fertilizer around weakened roots does not magically restart growth. Instead, those dissolved salts can create even more stress. Strong fertilizers increase the concentration of salts in the soil solution. Healthy roots can usually manage this. Weak roots often cannot. Instead of recovering, they become further dehydrated as water is pulled away from already damaged tissues. That is why gentle feeding works differently. The goal is not to shock the plant back to life. The goal is to make the root zone safe enough for recovery. Once moisture is balanced, once oxygen reaches the roots again, once pests have been addressed, once light conditions improve, then, and only then, can gentle natural fertilizers provide support while new roots slowly develop. Recovery rarely happens overnight. The old yellow leaves may never become green again. Burned edges usually stay burned. Damaged leaves often remain damaged until they naturally fall away. What you're really watching for is something much more encouraging. Fresh growth, tiny new leaves, healthy buds, strong new stems. These are signs that the plant has shifted from surviving to growing again. And among the gentlest natural options available, one stands out for stressed plants that need support without being overwhelmed. That is worm casting tea. Worm castings are often called black gold by gardeners, and for good reason. Unlike many fertilizers that deliver a strong burst of nutrients, worm castings work with remarkable gentleness. They are produced naturally as earthworms digest organic matter, leaving behind a rich material filled with beneficial microorganisms, organic compounds, and modest amounts of nutrients. When those castings are steeped in water for a short period, they create a mild liquid often referred to as worm casting tea. The important word here is mild. For recovering plants, that gentleness can make all the difference. Instead of flooding damaged roots with concentrated nutrients, worm casting tea provides a softer environment that supports both the plant and the living soil around it. Healthy soil is far more than dirt. It is an entire underground ecosystem. Beneficial bacteria, fungi, and countless microscopic organisms all play a role in helping plants access nutrients and develop stronger root systems. When soil biology suffers because of repeated chemical treatments, long periods of waterlogging, or simply exhausted potting mixes, plants often struggle even when nutrients are technically present. Worm casting tea may help support that underground community. It is not a miracle cure. It does not instantly repair damaged roots, and it cannot overcome severe problems like active root rot or continued overwatering. But once those underlying issues have been corrected, it offers gentle nutritional support without overwhelming fragile roots. Many gardeners use it after transplanting, after pruning damaged roots, or when refreshing tired potting soil that has lost much of its biological activity. The key is moderation. Light applications are usually all that is needed. The goal goal is to encourage recovery, not force rapid growth. Because healthy plants are not built through sudden bursts of fertilizer, they are rebuilt through steady, patient recovery. And while worm-casting tea is one of the safest natural options available, the next fertilizer on our list can be far more powerful. If used correctly, it can help genuinely nutrient-depleted plants begin growing again. But if used carelessly, it can damage weak roots even faster than before. Aged manure tea can be incredibly useful for certain plants, but only when it is prepared and used correctly. Many outdoor gardens slowly become nutrient-depleted over time. Tomatoes, peppers, squash, cucumbers, corn, and many flowering annuals are heavy feeders. Season after season, they pull nutrients from the soil. If those nutrients are never replaced, plants gradually become weaker, produce fewer flowers, and struggle to support healthy fruit. In situations like this, well-aged manure has long been valued by gardeners as a rich source of organic nutrition. When properly composted and fully aged, manure becomes much safer than its fresh form. Steeping small amounts of aged manure in water creates a diluted liquid sometimes called manure tea. Unlike synthetic fertilizers that often deliver nutrients in a sudden burst, aged manure tea releases nutrients more gradually. For plants recovering from genuine nutrient depletion, that slower approach can be beneficial. But this is also where many gardeners make a serious mistake. Fresh manure should never be used around stressed plants. Fresh animal manure can contain excessive nitrogen, harmful bacteria, weed seeds, and high levels of ammonia that may burn tender roots. Weak roots already struggling to recover simply cannot tolerate that kind of stress. Even properly aged manure tea should always be diluted and used sparingly. More is not better. If a plant has recently suffered from root rot, transplant shock, or severe drought, adding large amounts of manure tea too soon may still overwhelm its recovering root system. This is why diagnosis matters. If poor nutrition is truly the limiting factor, aged manure tea may provide gentle long-term support. If the real problem is poor drainage, damaged roots, or overwatering, manure tea is unlikely to solve anything. Gardeners often ask why one person gets incredible results while another sees no improvement at all. The answer is usually hidden underground. One plant needed nutrients, the other needed healthier roots. That difference changes everything. The most successful gardeners are not the ones who use the most fertilizer. They are the ones who understand what their plants are actually missing. And that brings us to one of the most popular homemade garden remedies on the internet: fermented rice water. Rice water has been used for generations in different parts of the world, both in the home and in the garden. When rice is rinsed or soaked, some starches, small amounts of minerals, and organic compounds enter the water. If that water is allowed to ferment for a short period, naturally occurring microorganisms begin breaking down those compounds. Some gardeners believe this process creates a mild solution that may encourage beneficial microbial activity in healthy soil. Notice the wording, may encourage. It is not a miracle fertilizer. It is not a substitute for balanced plant nutrition. And it certainly does not bring dead plants back to life. What fermented rice water may do is provide a gentle boost for soil biology under the right conditions. Healthy soil contains an enormous community of bacteria and fungi that constantly recycle organic matter into forms plants can use. Supporting that underground ecosystem can sometimes help recovering plants once other problems have already been corrected. But rice water also comes with several important cautions that are often ignored online. Fermented rice water should always be diluted before application. Using it too frequently or too heavily can create problems rather than solve them. If large amounts of starch remain in the soil, unwanted microbes may begin multiplying. The soil can develop unpleasant odors. Pests may become more interested. And in soils that are already staying too wet, adding additional organic liquids may actually make recovery slower. This is especially important for houseplants growing indoors. Containers hold much less soil than garden beds. Everything added to that limited root zone has a greater effect. A lightly diluted application every now and then is very different from pouring concentrated fermented rice water into every pot every week. Moderation is what matters. Think of fermented rice water as gentle encouragement rather than a complete feeding program. It supports. It does not replace proper plant care. And once again, success depends on correcting the underlying cause first. Healthy drainage, proper watering, adequate light, then, if appropriate, gentle microbial support. That simple order is often what separates recovering plants from declining ones. The next homemade remedy may surprise many gardeners because it comes from something that usually ends up in the compost bin. Onion peels. Most kitchens produce onion peels almost every week. Rather than throwing them away, some gardeners soak the dry outer skins in water to make a light infusion commonly called onion peel tea. This simple homemade liquid has become increasingly popular among home gardeners looking for natural ways to recycle kitchen scraps. The reason is fairly straightforward. Onion skins contain small amounts of minerals and naturally occurring plant compounds. When soaked in water, some of those compounds dissolve into the liquid. Many gardeners enjoy using onion peel tea because it is inexpensive, easy to prepare, and gives kitchen waste another purpose before composting. But expectations need to remain realistic. Onion peel tea is not a complete fertilizer. It does not contain enough nutrients to replace balanced plant nutrition over an entire growing season. It should never be viewed as a rescue cure for a severely declining plant. Instead, think of it as a light supplement, something that may offer gentle support as part of an overall healthy growing environment. The difference may seem subtle, but it is extremely important. One additional advantage of onion peel tea is that it is generally quite gentle when used occasionally. Unlike strong fertilizers that may increase salt levels around recovering roots, light homemade infusions are far less likely to overwhelm already stressed plants. Still, more is never automatically better. Repeated applications of any homemade liquid without understanding how the soil is responding can create imbalances over time. That is why careful observation remains one of the most valuable gardening skills. Every healthy new leaf tells a story, every fresh bud signals improvement, and every setback offers another opportunity to understand what your plants are trying to communicate. Now we come to the final natural fertilizer. In many ways, it works differently from everything we've discussed so far, because sometimes the biggest challenge is not feeding the plant. It is helping the plant recover from stress itself. Few moments test a gardener's patience more than transplant day. A healthy seedling is moved into a larger container or out into the garden. Everything appears perfect. Then, within hours, the leaves begin to droop. Growth slows. The plant seems to pause. This reaction is known as transplant shock. The roots have been disturbed. The plant suddenly faces different temperatures, different light, different moisture, and an entirely new environment. Similar stress happens during heat waves, strong winds, sudden cold spells, or long periods of drought. In situations like these, many gardeners reach for seaweed extract. Seaweed-based products have been used in horticulture for many years because they contain naturally occurring compounds that may help plants cope with environmental stress. They are not powerful fertilizers loaded with nitrogen. Instead, they are valued more for supporting overall plant resilience during recovery. When used according to directions, diluted seaweed extract can become part of a gentle recovery routine after transplanting or periods of environmental stress. But remember what we've learned throughout this video. Seaweed extract works best after the underlying problem has already been corrected. If the roots are drowning in saturated soil, seaweed extract cannot replace oxygen. If the plant is receiving only 2 hours of sunlight when it needs 6, no supplement will compensate for that missing light. Another excellent option for tired garden beds is compost tea. Like worm casting tea, compost tea is often appreciated for its connection to healthy soil biology. Made from mature compost and water, it introduces organic matter and beneficial microorganisms back into soils that may have become depleted over time. Gardeners with raised beds often notice that even productive soil gradually loses vitality after repeated harvests. Organic matter breaks down. Microbial diversity changes. The soil becomes less lively than it once was. Adding finished compost directly to the soil remains one of the best long-term solutions. Compost tea can serve as another gentle tool to support that process. Seaweed extract and compost tea share one important lesson. Neither one works because it performs magic. They work best because they support plants that are already being given the correct growing conditions, good watering, proper drainage, healthy soil, enough sunlight, appropriate temperatures. Those are still the foundations of successful gardening. Natural fertilizers simply build upon that foundation. And once you understand how each of these gentle feeds works, one question naturally follows. Which one should you actually choose? Because using the wrong natural fertilizer at the wrong time can slow recovery just as easily as using none at all.